Hello everyone, this is Venom, and we are here with another Destiny 2 build video. Today we're going to be going over a build for the Hunter for a Prismatic, and we're going to be going over one that I like to call the Benimaru build. Why do I call it the Benimaru build? Because when I made this build, and when it comes out, it's going to feel like this scene right here. That's right, it's going to be a very melee-centered build. It's going to be centered around melee kills and invisibility, and it's going to be very, very fun. Now, first off, we're going to go over the fragments and aspects we're going to be using, and I'm going to go with the exotic and then show you the actual build itself. Now, again, when doing these speculation builds, I want to remind everybody that all of the abilities we have access to are on the Bungie website. They have already told us what all of the abilities are, except for the new ones for each for each class. So, in the case of Hunter, we do not know specifically what Ascension does. They described it in one of their videos, but we don't actually know the actual hard details of what it does. We don't have it written down, so we cannot use that. However, we're not going to be using that for this build anyway. For this build, we will be using the Stylix Executioner, which is likely one you will be starting off with. So the build itself, we'll be using the Stylix Executioner, the Threaded Spectre, we will be using the Swarm Grenade, we'll be using Withering Blade for the melee, we'll be using Triple Jump, Gambler's Dodge, and finally, we will be using the Deadfall, the Shadow Shot Deadfall. Now, let's go over those abilities, and now we'll go over the exotic afterwards. Now, first up, we have Stylix Executioner, and it says, defeating a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target grants invisibility and true sight. However, the prismatic version will work off of any debuff target kill. So, it does not matter if it is a void debuff, or in the case of Withering Blade, if it is a stasis debuff. Any elemental debuff will proc Stylix Executioner. Next up, because we do not have access to Vanishing Step with Prismatic, we're going to be using the Threaded Spectre. And it says, activating your class ability, your dodge, leaves behind a decoy woven from strand matter that draws the attention of nearby combatants. After taking significant damage, or when combatants approach, a decoy detonates, dealing damage and releasing threadlings that seek out and attack nearby foes. Now, the reason we're using Threaded Spectre is because we do not have access to Vanishing Step with Prismatic. So we want some other way to kinda, if not turn invisible, to get the attention off of us when we dodge. Threaded Spectre fits that build perfectly. Next up, for the grenades, we're using the Swarm Grenade. We're using the Swarm Grenade because, one, they will track down enemies for you. The very little you have to do, toss it in general direction, they will chase enemies. And two, and this is a bigger one, they will actually scorch enemies. And when you kill a scorched enemy with Stylix Executioner on Prismatic, you will turn invisible. That's right. Next up, for the Withering Blade, I've actually got two different melees I wanted to use for this. It's either A, the Withering Blade, or B, the Threaded Needle from Strand. I went with the Withering Blade just because it is a bit quicker. It will bounce between enemies a bit quicker. Granted, you're not going to get melee charge back, but you're going to get 2 charges of this, and you will be able to get your melee back using Gambler's Dodge, which will be our dodge. Because again, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge, and we're going to be using Triple Jump. Now, while it's true that Threaded Needle from Strand will give us melee energy back, and technically speaking, you could juggle it with enough enemies on the field. However, Withering Blade, if you use both charges, will freeze a bigger enemy that wouldn't necessarily die to a melee. And Threaded Spike is definitely not going to kill yellow bar enemies, so this is going to be kind of also an oh shit button too, in case you run into something bigger than you can kill. Bam bam, 2 Withering Blades, they're frozen. Now, technically speaking, you can use whatever super you want to for this one. For this build, I'm using Deadfall just because it is a very good support super, and will also help you take out a lot of ads as well as help you do damage to bosses. So it is a good all-around super. Now, because of one of the fragments we're going to be using, you can't actually switch this around. We do not know what Frost Armor does yet. I may switch it to the Stasis super, depending on what Frost Armor does, but as of right now, with the information that we have, we're going to go ahead and go with the Deadfall, which again is a very good solid Hunter super and is a good support ability. Now, as for the fragments, we're going to be starting off with the Facet of Dawn. It says, powered melee hits against targets make you radiant. Powered melee final blows make both you and nearby allies radiant. So we're going to be doing so many melee hits, especially powered melee hits, we're going to go ahead and make ourselves radiant very, very easily and make our allies radiant. Next up, we have the Facet of Defiance. It says, finishers create a detonation that either jolts, scorches, slows, severs, or makes targets volatile based on the damage type of your equipped super. Because we're using Void, we're using Deadfall, we're going to be making our targets volatile. Now, our equipped super is also going to affect the Facet of Purpose. It says picking up an overpower grants either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Wounded Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. we are going to be getting an overshield because we're using Deadfall. Now you understand why your super is so important. You kind of understand how they affect your facets. So you can switch up your super depending on what you want your Fragments of Defiance and Purpose to do. Next up, the Facet of Hope. It says, while you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. You should have an elemental buff up at all times, either from picking up an overpower or from getting a melee kill, because you should be getting Radiant from your melee kills or hits, and you should be getting Overshield by picking up an overpower. And finally, the Facet of Ruin. This is going to be a facet that's going to work very, very well with the Prismatic Hunter because it says, this increases the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a crystal, or stasis crystal, or frozen target, and increases the size of solar ignitions. Guess what the grenade type for the Prismatic Hunter is when they're transcendent? It's going to be stasis, and it's going to be solar. It's going to be pretty much for any Hunter Prismatic build. The Facet of Ruin is going to make a grenade that much better across the board. So keep that one in mind. So those are going to be the 5 fragments you're going to be using. Let me go over the exotics we're going to be using, and I'm going to explain why we're using them. So if you only had to choose one exotic, it was definitely going to be the Assassin's Cowl. And it says, powered melee final blows grant invisibility and restore a portion of health and shields. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the duration of the invisibility and the amount of health and shields restored. If we've only got one exotic, we're going to use the Assassin's Cowl, the full exotic. However, if we're using the combined effects, the Assassin's Cowl will give us the invisibility on powered melee final blows and finishers, and the and finishers portion is why the Assassin's Cowl is so important. You see, we do not have access to the fragment of obscurity for our hunter. That's only on the pure void hunter. That is a fragment only for it. It's not on Prismatic. So finishers are not going to make us invisible, which is a staple for the Invis Hunter. The Assassin's Cowl fixes that issue. Now, there was also an effect on screen during the dev video that said powered melee kills will cause enemies to ignite. There were a couple of different exotic effects that could come from. It either come from Calibrand's Hand, which does roughly the same thing, but it only works with proximity knives. I think the perk actually comes from the Severance Enclosure. The Severance Enclosure says powered final melee blows unleash a damaging explosion. This seems more in tune to what was going on screen versus the Calibrand's Hand. The Calibrand Hand works with a very specific melee. It works with a very, very specific melee. And they do tend to, or seem to be, straying away from very type and ability-specific exotics for Prismatic. So, personally, I think it's from Severance Enclosure, which would be perfect. If I could combine two, it would definitely be the Assassin's Cowl and the Severance Enclosure. That way, those powered melee final blows will also cause explosions. And again, that's where the Benimaru comes in from it. So, if I could combine two, it will be the Assassin's Cowl and the Severance Enclosure. If I could only choose one, I might go Assassin's Cowl. That's kind of the number one. But you know what? The Severance Enclosure will more likely be more fun and cause more damage. So keep that one in mind. If you want your finishers to make you invisible, Assassin's Cowl. If you want all that extra damage and explosions, Severance Enclosure / Calibrand's Hand, depending on what that effect is we actually saw. We know powered melee final blows will cause ignitions, we just don't know which exotics it's based off of, or they can both be in different columns, both the Assassin's Cowl and that explosion perk, so we'll see. Now, as for our stats, again, we're going to go with 100 mobility for your hunter. That's always going to be your number one stat. That is going to be your tool. Your dodge is going to be very important to dodge out of damage. It's also going to help you get your melee back, so you definitely want to have that. Resilience is also going to be the next one up there. Get that up to either 100 or get it up to 70 and go ahead and add on a Font of Endurance. And then finally, go ahead and get your discipline stat up as well. Do not worry about getting your strength stat up at all because you can get your melee back from dodging. So don't waste any points on trying to get your strength up there. Your melee is not going to do you any good as far as, you know, that cooldown timer. Most of your melee is going to be coming back from either Orbs of Power or more than likely your mobility from dodging. Now, of course, for mods, for helmet, we got the standard stuff on. We've got on the Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout for a group, or 2 copies of Heavy Ammo Finder for your solo play, and of course, a Harmonic Siphon mod. Now, I'm assuming the Harmonic Siphons are also going to be based off of what your super is too. If not, just go ahead and toss on whatever Siphon mod you need to, but it'll more likely just be the Siphons will be based off of what your super is. Next up for arms, we're on a copy of Heavy Handed. Your powered melee final blows will create an overpower. Can be a very, very melee-centric build. Next up, we've got on Focusing Strike. It says, grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a powered melee attack. You don't have to get a kill with this one, you just gotta cause damage and get your class ability to recharge quicker. And finally, a copy of Impact Induction. It says, causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. Again, damage is not kill, so even if you don't get a kill, it's still gonna help you get those cooldowns down. Next up for your chest piece, toss on whatever reserve mod you want to. Now, even though this is a very melee-centric build, your melees are range melee, so you don't necessarily have to be up close. So you do not have to have on concussive dampener or melee damage resist. In fact, you can go ahead and toss on other stuff like the harmonic reserves, or if you want to use a sword, toss on a couple loosened blades. But our melees are going to be distance melees. They're going to be withering blades. You're not going to be up close using them, so you don't have to worry about necessarily being up close and personal. You can use whatever damage mod you want to, or damage resist mod you want to, and then go ahead and toss on whatever reserves you want to as well. Next up for legs. Now, the beauty of Prismatic and the beauty of this build, especially this build particular, is that it does not matter what type of damage you use. Now, the weapons you use, you want to use very particular ones, but the types don't matter. You want to use weapons that will debuff your opponent. What I mean by that, something with incandescence, something with destabilizing rounds to proc volatile rounds, something with chill clip, something with severing. Doesn't matter what the weapon type is, whatever you use, just make sure it can actually debuff your target. Now, whatever weapons you choose, go ahead and toss on whatever weapon surge mod you want for that. You can put on one, you can put on two, it's whichever you want to do. But make sure you have on a copy of recuperation to pick up some health and maybe pick up more power. And then personally, I'd go ahead and put on a copy of absolution as well. But make sure you match up your weapon surge with whatever damage type you're going to be doing. More than likely on your secondary weapon, but it's totally up to you. Just make sure the weapons you're using, if possible, will debuff your enemy. That way your weapons will also make you invisible, not just your melees. And finally, to make over the power, we have on a copy of Reaper. Using your class ability and then getting a weapon kill right afterwards will generate an overpower. Then having a copy of Proximity Ward on, again, we're going to be up close and personal using our finishers, thanks to Assassin's Cowl, and thanks to one of our fragments that will cause enemies to get debuff. Make sure you got on Proximity Ward. And then finally, you can toss whatever you want in the last column, but personally, I like to put on Powerful Attractions to give me over the power that are nearby, select them to me whenever I dodge. Now, as far as weapons go, like I said, you want to put on weapons that are going to be debuffing your target as well. So examples I said before, something like Chill Clip, that will slow your targets when you hit them. That will be a debuff that will turn you invisible when you kill them. Something like Incandescent, will also would debuff your target, that will kill them when, that will turn you invisible when you kill them. Something else, something like Volt Shot, that will jolt your opponents, that should turn you invisible when you kill them. So keep these things in mind when you're choosing your weapons and choosing your weapon searches. So how does the build work? Basically, all your melees should be causing explosions, all your powered melees. You'll have two copies of Withering Blade, and then you can then dodge using your Gambler's Dodge to get another copy of Withering Blade, of course, and your dodge is going to be very, very quick to come back. Now, on top of that, all of those Withering Blades will hit 3 different enemies if they're around. Each one has the potential to let you turn invisible if you kill them. On top of that, your weapon should also be proccing debuffs, which should also turn you invisible. All these thanks to Stylish Executioner. Sorry, I'm talking a little bit loud. My son's starting to wake up a little bit, so I gotta hurry the video up. Now, that being said, your exotics are also going to completely depend on the rolls you get and whether or not some of these exotics can actually roll the way we think they do. So worst case scenarios, like I said, if you go ahead and toss on something like the Assassin's Cowl, then your finishers will also make you invisible, and your finishers will also cause your enemies around you to become volatile, and of course, killing them will turn you invisible. Now, assuming you can also get the Severance Enclosure roll with that, or even by itself, then your powered melee kills will also cause enemies to explode or ignite, like I said in the dev thing. So we still don't have the 100% of that one. At the very least, we know, like I said, your melee final blows will cause explosions, or it specifically said ignitions, so ignitions would also cause you to turn invisible, but your Withering Blades will also turn you invisible anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. It's going to turn you invisible no matter what. So either way, this build is basically built around turning you completely invisible with pretty much every action you've got, and powering up your grenade because as a bonus, that fragment also supercharges the Transcendent Grenade for the Hunter, so that's going to be a very, very fun build to use. And that's going to be the build. Like I said, unfortunately, we cannot test the build out right now. However, we do know that the build works. We've gone through, we've really confirmed that these effects are going to be in the game because they show them on the screen. Now, they could take these out of the game between now and then. We don't know. However, we do know, like I said, Bungie showed us what all these effects are, they showed us what our abilities are going to be, and they also told us that they tailor them to work with any effects or any elemental types within the Prismatic subclass. So we know they're going to work together, we just got to get our hands on there, and the build should be a lot nuttier than we think it is because the way I've made these builds, I kind of dumbed them down a bit. I kind of restricted the effects a little bit. They're more than likely going to be doing a lot more than I even described in there. That's going to do for today, guys. Again, thank you all for coming by, and thank you again for all the love and support, and thank you for those that, wish my wife and my family good health and congratulate us. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming by. Like the video if you liked what we did here. Love it if you loved what we did, and I will see you guys on the next video.